Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from around the world. Welcome to our session on working together to build a sustainable ocean economy. My name is Christian Teleki. I am the Global Director of the Ocean Program at the World Resource Institute, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the Director of the Friends of Ocean Action for the World Economic Forum and the head of the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. And I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's session. During our session today, we have some fantastic and terrific panelists who'll be sharing some thoughts and views from their considerable experience and to discuss a vision for a sustainable ocean economy and how we can have conservation and sustainability that go hand in hand. We'll discuss some of the exciting efforts that are currently underway to build sustainable ocean economies. Our session today will begin with 20 minutes of a moderated discussion, followed by 15 minutes of audience questions and answer segments. So I do encourage you to put some of your questions in the chat. Keep those going. You know how these virtual events go. We like to keep them interactive, and hopefully we'll get some interesting questions coming up. I can't guarantee if there are lots of questions that we'll get to all of them, but we'll certainly try during our session today. Before we get into the main segment of the session of the event today, I want to encourage everyone to participate in a Slido question. For those of you who have not perhaps done a Slido poll before, it's an interactive platform that you can use in your web browser, you can use on your phone, whatever way you're accessing this session. And if you go to slide.do, that's sli.do in your web browser, and then use the Slido event code found on your screen to join this session. And so once you do that, you put it in, it'll come to your question. And the question there is, what comes to mind when you think of a sustainable ocean economy? One or two words, just one word if it comes to mind when you're thinking about it, and put that in there, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. So, but while you're doing that, perhaps there are a couple of things I want you to think about. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the deep interconnections between human and planetary health, and the need for nations to work together to respond to some of these global threats. I mean, indeed, we have an opportunity, an obligation to reset and rebuild a more equitable, resilient, knowledge-based, and prosperous future that is in harmony with nature and indeed the ocean, which is what about the session today. And certainly building a sustainable ocean economy is one of the most important tasks and greatest opportunities of our time. It is critical to achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and is vital if we are to emerge from current and future crises with stronger economies, healthy people, and more resilient economies. So I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. We've got a great group here. We have Helena Vieira, who is the Director General of Maritime Policy under the Minister of Sea, Portugal. Welcome, Helena. Delighted to see you. Delighted to welcome Karen. Glad you came in, Karen. Nice to see you. Karen Kemper, who is the Global Director of Environment, Natural Resources, and Blue Economy at the World Bank. And then finally, and by no means least, Niall, who is the Senior Assistant Director, Deputy Minister of Strategic Policy with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. Welcome to you all. So glad that you could be with us today. I want to look at, just briefly before we get into the panelists and the discussion, with perhaps a brief look at our Slido poll, if we may. If we could pull that up, just to look at some of those words that are coming up on the screen that are going to be of interest when you think about what you all thought about, what comes to mind when you think of a sustainable ocean economy. And what we've done is we put this together in a word cloud, so you'll see the results in a cluster of words that come up. Obviously, the bigger the size of the word, the more important you feel, or at least that the more sort of repeat that was mentioned by the audience. So if we could have that poll come up, that would be terrific. So it seems that the result is not showing up, but we'll come back to that in a moment, and we'll hopefully have a look at it. But keep thinking about some of these words, because obviously these are going to be important, the way we think about a sustainable ocean economy, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So when we think about a sustainable ocean plan, it must really capture a broad spectrum of ocean-related economic activities and sectors, while at the same time integrating environmental and climate objectives. And I'm delighted that both Portugal and Canada, who are on the line at the moment, are members of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, and they've committed to developing these plans to 100% sustainably manage their exclusive economic zones by 2025. Amazing commitment to achieve this, and really setting the bar high for others to follow. And so this obviously begs lots of big questions. And one of those certainly that comes to mind is, how are you able to ensure that these plans reflect a broad range of interests, and how important is a sustainable ocean industries in terms of economic recovery from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic? So a couple of questions there. First of all, how does the plan reflect a broad range of interests that are there? And certainly, is there a certain role in terms of these sustainable ocean industries when we think about the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic? And I wonder if I could turn to Helena, to you first in Portugal. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Hello, everybody. Good morning from Portugal, from sunny Lisbon. So thank you for the question. It's an honor to be part of the high-level panel of sustainable ocean economy representing Portugal here. And the way that Portugal actually make sure that these plans reflect a broad range of interests is by inputting the recommendations or the decisions that were taken under the high-level panel under its new National Ocean Strategy 2030. This new national strategy was just approved in May and just publicly made available last week. And actually, under this strategy, what we've done is we come from a starting point where we've mapped the outcomes of the previous antecessor strategies. We have a national ocean satellite account that measures the economic weight of the ocean economy in Portugal. And that's our starting point. And there are also the different sectors like tourism, maritime transport, naval and shipyard industry, but also the emerging sectors, aquaculture, renewable ocean energies, robotics, artificial intelligence. So this national ocean account is a relevant supplier of data and something that guides the national politics. So under this strategy, this new ocean strategy, we have actually defined 10 strategic goals for the decade, very aligned with the European Green Deal and the UN Agenda 2030 of Sustainable Development Goals. And for these goals or to be achieved, we have defined 13 priority intervention areas. So just to show that these strategies actually work, Portugal started in 2013 with a weight of the ocean economy of about 2.5%. And the last data that we have from 2018 shows that the ocean economy represents 5.1% of the gross added value of the Portuguese economy, which is quite relevant. It's the third biggest sector in the national economy. So actually these strategies do work. The main difference between this new strategy and its predecessors, it's the vision of the strategy. And the vision lies on this very unique principle that you first need a healthy ocean to then develop a sustainable blue economy, a sustainable social blue economy as well. So this is the vision of the new National Ocean Strategy. And this is then what drives an action plan that is connected to this strategy that encompasses 185 actions until 2030 to accomplish the goals that we have also decided. Another aspect that I would like to point out, and just to finish, is that having this strategy is very relevant because it's a national strategy, both for political guidance, but also for society guidance. And the other role that I think Portugal is doing to make sure that this happens is committed to taking the lead in putting the oceans in the daily political and civil agenda by communicating and being very active in a number of relevant bodies like the high-level panel you just mentioned, but also the Portuguese presidency of the European Union Council that is just finishing this the end of this month. The month of June was the Ocean Month with several meetings, the All-Atlantic meeting, the Blue Agenda in the Green Deal meeting just occurred last week. The UN Conference of the Oceans in 2022 will be also in Portugal. We are also part of the Atlantic Strategy Committee of the European Union. Portugal has a leading role on the maritime integrated policy within the European Union. So, and also in the countries of Portuguese language around the world, and our role in the blue economy development under those issues. So, to answer strictly, we put these plans, reflected them on the national strategy and on the measures that we will take in the next years, but we also bring awareness of the need to further implement this vision of the healthy ocean as the only modus operandi to have a sustainable blue economy in the next decade.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much for that, Helena. Very good to see that you know, the way Portugal is placing an emphasis on this. And indeed, recognizing that a healthy ocean is a requirement for a sustainable ocean economy, and really, you know, important that you're laying this out not just on a 1 to 2 years, but you're actually thinking, you know, to 2030 and decade and beyond, and making that relevant to your national agenda, and indeed beyond, you know, Portugal's borders. And when we think beyond borders, perhaps we could go over to Canada and across the Atlantic to Niall. Love your thoughts and perspectives. I mean, Canada maybe is taking a slightly different approach to Portugal, but I think is certainly subscribing to the sustainable ocean economy, and love your reflections on this.
Thank you, and a pleasure to be here. It's certainly great to learn more about what Portugal has been engaged with these recent years. I mean, I think as your audience will appreciate, the global economy has the oceans economy has the potential to double by 2030, and that has the opportunity to spur real opportunities for economic growth and job creation, as long as the ocean can remain healthy. And in recognition of this, Canada made oceans really a key theme of our 2018 G7 presidency. There, we committed to ocean protection through the Charlevoix Blueprint on healthy oceans and seas and resilient coastal communities, as well as the Oceans Plastics Charter. In 2018, we also co-hosted the world's first international conference on the sustainable blue economy with Kenya and Japan, a vital step in helping nations transition towards sustainable ocean economies. All of these initiatives, I think, have shown us that we must work in partnership with the global community, with industry, civil society, our Indigenous communities to truly transition towards more sustainable ocean economies. We're taking this approach while developing our own sustainable blue economy strategy that will guide actions on all of our 3 coasts and across all ocean sectors. With this strategy, we will meet our high-level panel commitment to develop a sustainable ocean plan, and happy to participate with many other countries in that initiative. Today, actually, Canada concludes its public consultation on the blue economy strategy. So over the past several months, we've sought input from a wide range of Indigenous partners and stakeholders in industry, different levels of government, non-governmental organizations. A successful blue economy strategy will also seek to encourage more participation from women, from Indigenous peoples, from youth and underrepresented groups in our oceans sector. At the same time, the COVID pandemic has impacted all of us in significant ways, changing the way we live and how we work, while at the same time reinforcing the value of collaboration. And we'll have the opportunity to weave that into our strategy moving forward. Advancing environmental conservation objectives and growing the global ocean economy will create good jobs and opportunities for ocean sectors and coastal communities to build back better from the pandemic in coming years. I think many developing nations are geographically well positioned to benefit from a stronger blue economy. But we need to work together to ensure that for least developed economies, there is access to technology and the financial capacity to benefit from ocean resources. And in support of Canada's endorsement of the high-level panel's transformations document, and to further the work on the Ocean Plastics Charter and the Charlevoix Blueprint for healthy oceans, seas, and resilient coasts, last December, the Government of Canada announced a $4 million contribution to the World Bank's ProBlue Fund. These funds will help developing countries to produce sustainable ocean plans. So that's just a brief snapshot of what we've been up to recently. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Niall. Some very important points there. And I think hopefully listeners are starting and viewers are starting to see a theme around in terms of a healthy ocean and the requirement there, and picking it and perhaps taking it further when you mentioned around the importance of the inclusive and diverse element in the consultative process that Canada has gone through. So I think that's a really important element that I think we're starting to see as a thread in terms of the sort of engagement with people, different sectors, in this. And indeed, it was good to see that the G7 baton of the ocean had indeed been picked up by the UK this past weekend, that Canada had kicked off in Charleroi a number of years ago. So very good to see that theme is continuing. But one thing you did mention there, Niall, that I think is quite important is really how do other countries be involved and making sure that other countries can be involved in the sustainable ocean planning, process. And you did mention ProBlue, which, for those that are not familiar with it, is a very important World Bank initiative supporting the development of integrated, sustainable and healthy marine and coastal resources. And I'm hoping, Karen, you would tell us a little bit more about how it will assist developing countries access key ocean sectors and indeed better manage marine and coastal resources. I mean, it's a terrific facility and opportunity. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, please. Karen. I'm afraid we're having trouble with your audio, Karen. Could you please try unmuting yourself? There you go, the dreaded mute button. Should be on the left-hand side of your screen. Okay. Well, while I'll tell you what, Karen, we're gonna while our technical staff try to resolve the problem with you, perhaps we'll continue on and with some of the other moderators, and we'll definitely come back to you because I'm very keen to hear about ProBlue. Maybe if I could turn to Niall this time. There's been an emerging interest and importance of the ocean as part of the global climate system, and is now being considered as an important climate solution or important solution to climate change. We know that some of the work that came out of the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy showed that we could get 1/5 of the greenhouse gas reduction of emissions to meet the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 Paris Agreement. And so I guess I'd love for, from your perspective, like what are some examples of work that can be done or scaled up to help combat the effects of climate change when we think about the ocean? Niall?
Thanks for the question. The ocean, of course, is a critical part of the global climate system and therefore vital to human health, producing over half the world's oxygen and absorbing 50 times more carbon dioxide than our atmosphere. So coastal communities, and as we know, particularly small island developing states, are strongly impacted by climate change through sea level rise, acidification, and extreme weather events. I think Canada has a role to play in helping to combat these challenges. And that's why our government recently released a strengthened national climate plan, which includes 64 new measures and $15 billion in investments. This includes investments that will embrace nature as a solution to climate change. And the Canadian government is investing up to $631 million over 10 years to work domestically with provinces, territories, conservation organizations, Indigenous communities, private landowners, and others to enhance wetlands, peatlands, grasslands, and agricultural lands to boost their capacity to sequester carbon. As well as, of course, a broader commitment and investing a further over $3 billion in planting 2 billion trees. So largely in the terrestrial space. As we know, large amounts of carbon are stored in Canada's forests, soils, wetlands, grasslands, and also oceans today. And nature-based solutions can increase that storage and help keep harmful emissions out of the atmosphere. In line with this, Canada is also setting an ambitious new nationally determined contribution target of 40 to 45% greenhouse gas emission reductions below 2005 levels by 2030. Canada remains committed to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So ocean-based climate mitigation and adaptation measures will be needed to build a sustainable blue economy. Such measures can include conservation and restoration of what we'd call blue carbon coastal ecosystems, such as mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes. Canada's own Coastal Restoration Fund is one example of this. It provides $75 million over 5 years to support projects that restore coastal aquatic habitats. As well as storing carbon, these blue carbon ecosystems can also help protect vulnerable coastal communities from extreme weather events. So I hope that's a helpful set of examples to support the conversation.
No, that's incredibly helpful. And I think, you raised some very important points there when we talk about nature-based solutions, restorations, about the national determined contributions when it comes to the ocean. And this is going to be very important as we lead into COP26 later this year in Glasgow, where we hope that the ocean will play a much greater role in that. And we certainly know that a number of countries are pushing hard on that, not the least of which is the COP26 presidency of the UK. So perhaps I could go to Portugal and see, love some initial reflections on perhaps the climate ocean nexus and perhaps some of the solutions and some of the thinking that Portugal is placing on that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak also about this here. So continuing with the National Ocean Strategy, it has, as I said, 10 strategic goals. And for example, the first one is related to fighting climate change, pollution, and restoring marine ecosystem as a broad and very ambitious goal. But I would like to point out that, for example, some of the goals that were included in the SMART goals that were included in this strategy, so that we know by 2030 have we done good or bad, it's of course in line with the Agenda 2030 and the high-level panel commitment to increase the number of marine protected areas in national waters to 30% of our national waters. But also very interesting is that we want to reduce 17% of the CO2 emissions with maritime transport and maritime activities. But most important, I think, and more relevant than reducing the emissions is also a very strong bet on renewable ocean energy from the ocean, marine energies. And this is something that it's really clearly stated also there. Another goal that I think that we are doing very well is to promote the development of the emerging more sustainable blue activities, such as marine biotech, sustainable integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, multi platforms for offshore aquaculture and renewable energy production. But also, and linking a bit with the ProBlue initiative, Portugal has launched with the European Investment Fund what we call the Portuguese Blue Fund. So this is a fund of funds where Portugal has invested 25 million euros, and the European Investment Fund the remaining 25 million to make a fund of 50 million euros. That will be multiplied by 1.5 times with private investors. And the goal of this fund is to invest up to 75 million euros in the next years for sustainably blue economy projects, including ecosystem services approach projects. Also, and in line with the COVID impact and the resilient plans, Portugal just got approved its resilient plan, the first in Europe. And under this plan, there is a specific component for the ocean where we've allocated 252 million euros to develop several investments and reforms that are needed for Portugal to really boost its ocean role economy. And just to final this up, one of the actions we are also promoting in this plan is some sort of blue carbon incentives or blue carbon sort of bonds, where companies are more and more aware of the potential of ocean ecosystems to not only combat their CO2 emissions, but also to increase the biodiversity, for example, for other activities like aquaculture or fisheries. And we are trying to study how can we actually incentivize more these blue carbon initiatives in Portugal. So these are just some examples of the things that we are doing here. So both on the investment side to promote to further directly invest in startups and companies that are doing good in the blue. Also on the political side, with aligning our national strategy with specific goals here, and then at the end, used in the companies, how can we incentivize more of this ecosystem approach into the business of the blue economy?
Indeed. Thanks for that, Helena. I think you raise a very important point here that I want to briefly pick up on is it's just this co-location of activities where you can have low carbon sources of energy, food security, jobs, and protecting biodiversity. So it's good for people and planet, and thinking about this blue thread of climate change through much of the work that you're doing in your 10-point strategy that you've just recently launched. I believe now we can come back to Karen. Karen, I hopefully you can hear us now. You heard some mentioning of the sort of the importance of finance from both Portugal and Canada. We'd love to hear more about the ProBlue Fund, how it can assist developing countries to access key ocean sectors and better manage marine and coastal resources. So Karen, we hope we can hear you now.
Yes, I hear you. And can you hear me this time?
Yes, please go ahead. Welcome.
Great, Christian. Thanks for this interesting question. A few years ago, when at the World Bank, we were already very engaged in lots of oceanic sectors. But that's when we started engaging with colleagues all around the world, including with a lot of the UN agencies, on thinking through what a blue economy approach would be. And in that process, discussions with other partners, and I'm very happy to say that the EU, where obviously Portugal is a part, but also very importantly Canada, were some of the pioneers in saying, well, we really would like to provide funding and be partners in an approach that can help developing countries specifically to develop blue economy activities all across their sectors. So we have ProBlue. It is a fund that has by now been funded with about $130 million. It has four main areas of activity, from sustainable fisheries and aquaculture to prevention of marine pollution and litter, including plastic, limiting impacts of traditional innovative sectors, and fourth, an integrated seascapes approach and blue financing. So these are the four areas that we cover in ProBlue, and countries are able to access funding to, for instance, get technical assistance or to help develop the investment projects that they want to do. It can cut across both the public and the private sectors, and it really cuts across sectors. So, for instance, we are supporting countries in the Caribbean with $60 million project that is currently under preparation to what we call unleashing the blue economy in the Eastern Caribbean. And that is where we focus on a number of aspects of the ocean economy that's relevant for these particular islands and what these client governments would like to focus on. That includes fisheries, tourism, and solid integrated waste management. But then we are also helping countries, for instance, to increase port resilience and reduce pollution and greenhouse gases in maritime transport by helping them make a plan in a number of Caribbean countries. And we are also working with countries, be it, for instance, Ghana or Nigeria, on marine plastics, the same in the East Asia region, and so on. So it's a fund where, depending on where a country stands and where its focus is, it can build blue lens activities, as I like to call it, into their development process. And just to pick up on the integrated ocean management plans, we are very pleased to support those countries that are following up on the high-level panel on oceans, and who want to start building integrated ocean management plans. And we have received some additional funding, specifically also from Canada, to be able to make that possible for countries. And we've already started with two that have approached the World Bank and that want to go that way. So that way we hope that we support the development of a healthy blue economy and help developing countries really link into everything that is going on in the sector. And I just like to also really want to emphasize what Mrs. Vieira said. The importance is really to have a healthy ocean, and from that we can then benefit from the ocean in the many activities that we do in the different sectors. But the two go together. You cannot just focus on the sectors if you don't have a healthy ocean.
Some very, very important points there, Karen, and very good to hear more about ProBlue. No doubt many of the viewers will be interested to learn more, and especially the point you made about the blue lens in the development process. And I think that is really important. Often that is not considered at the beginning of this process, but actually is an add-on at the end. And I think that certainly, that paradigm is changing. I believe we have the Slido results. If we could just bring those up from the previous question, and to see that word cloud again. There we go. Okay, so recall that the question that we put to all of you was, what comes to mind when you think of a sustainable ocean economy? What comes to mind when you think of a sustainable ocean economy? And remember, the bigger the word, the more frequent it was responded to, or that you thought it was there. And interesting to see, clean seas and health are really the big ones that are coming up there, and that sort of fits very well with the panel that what our panelists have just been talking about. Also, some other very interesting ones that I see coming up here. We heard Helena from Portugal talk a little bit about seaweed, aquaculture, this idea of a cooperation, bringing things together. See, it's already shifting. More people are adding some of their words in here. Unsurprising, the issue of finance comes up again. A really interesting note here about trafficking, and that is a sort of an interesting question mark related to perhaps human rights and issues of equity. And certainly, Niall, you mentioned areas around Indigenous. So very interesting to see some of those themes that you already thought, without even having looked at them, have now come up when we're talking to some of our speakers. So very interesting there. I think what I'd like to do now is perhaps come back to our speakers, and perhaps if I may, in just a little limited time that we have left, and come to each one of you briefly with this final this sort of final question, and really the notion is here is that ocean management must be informed by the best available science and knowledge, and the question there is how can the international community continue to boost innovation, and the role of data and science and decision making when it comes to sustainable ocean planning and sort of the strengthening of the sustainable ocean plans. And what I'd like to do is perhaps just briefly to have your thoughts on this, and I come to you first, Helena, and then I'll come to you, Niall, and then Karen, I'll give you the last word before we wrap up. So please, Helena, over to you.
Okay, so relating to this question, I think it's also a very important question, and I was surprised actually to not see science bigger in the cloud there, because the third aspect of Portugal's vision for the new national ocean strategy is that Pillar one, you need the healthy ocean as a basis for everything else. Then you need to develop sustainable blue economy, inclusive and circular. And the third part is all of this needs to be done on very sound scientific knowledge to support political governance. So science is actually one of the priority intervention areas, and to continue boosting the knowledge and science of the ocean for the Portuguese waters, but also internationally speaking, is also a very important part of our national ocean strategy. And I think Portugal is part, as well as Canada, in some of these, cross-Atlantic and international cooperation bodies and groups. And this is one thing that we must continue, and probably in some cases, for example, the All-Atlantic group initiative from the European Union, I think it's quite relevant and it's quite broad to foster scientific research and cooperation, but also some more bilateral also activities I think will be relevant. But when it comes to the common goal and the common ocean, because there's only one ocean, as further as we are concerned, we need to put ocean data and ocean monitor at the center of scientific funding programs, at the center of bilateral activities. But this doesn't do any good if it's not open access data or jointly developed projects. So I believe that how can the international community continue to boost this is by actually continue to be engaged in cooperation projects, look at the ocean space interaction as a whole, and continue to build on this. For example, the Atlantic Observatory that is just being set up is one example of this great cooperation that we are doing, or the air center between the Atlantic, so the ocean and the space link within the Atlantic area are two examples of how we can boost this. But also under the new Horizon Europe program, there will be also some important focus on this development. So I think that this is the way that we must continue to boost the cooperation, international cooperation to develop scientific data, because we really don't know much about the ocean yet.
I know, and I think that really speaks to that cooperation element. I mean, Niall, does that resonate with you across the Atlantic? And I think that word of cooperation, open access. I mean, certainly I saw cooperation come up there within the word cloud. Does that resonate with you and Canada when you think about sort of science and innovation and putting this at the heart of decision making?
Absolutely. So I'll confess, as someone with an undergraduate in marine biology, I've got a special sympathy for science and its foundational importance in what we do in this sphere. This decade is the UN decade of ocean science for sustainable development. And I think that is about cooperation and really provides us, I think, an exciting opportunity to work together to, turn the tide on ocean health by using science to help tackle many of the challenges that are faced in our marine environments. Canada's proud to be a member of the Ocean Decade Alliance, and this is a network. So speaking to that cooperation point, that supports, enhances, and leverages commitments towards the Oceans Decade. The Alliance is intended to bring opportunities for Canada to collaborate with Portugal, as Helen has mentioned, and other partners on topics of mutual interest throughout that period. And for this, Canada back in 2018 announced an investment of up to $9.5 million in funding activities through this decade. And this gives us the opportunity to work with both domestic and international partners to advance ocean science, to develop and share knowledge, fundamentally build that infrastructure of science, and foster some of the relationships that support the Ocean Decade outcomes. I think above all, we really do want to connect science and society. So that's through an emphasis in our work on transdisciplinary approaches. This is about supporting opportunities for early career ocean professionals to be involved, and also to promote the advancement of gender equity in ocean science. So these are all some of the priorities that Canada is looking to advance as it collaborates with other countries, and very excited to collaborate with Portugal and with others and things like the more focused efforts like the All Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance, and as a participant in the Galway Statement on Atlantic Ocean cooperation. So I'll leave it there, Christian. Thank you.
Great. No, I appreciate that, Niall. And there's some great stuff there in terms of science, society, making it relevant and connecting it. And I think that really important when they're on the cusp of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. Perhaps, Karen, just very briefly, as we just have a few minutes here, if I just had some final words on the importance of science and data as far as the bank is concerned, and putting that at the heart of decision making, just very briefly, if we may.
Yeah, sure, Christian. I'd like to add one component to what was said. I agreed with everything that Helen and Niall said, but I'd like to bring in the economics lens also. Obviously, you cannot manage what you don't measure. We all know that. And so we need the core sciences on the one hand of knowing what is in the ocean, what are the ecosystem services that are being provided to us by the oceans. So we need that, but we also need that in order to value it, in order to bring it into decision-making processes. We still find that too many times the value of all that the ocean provides to us, be it coastal services, be it the fish that comes from the ocean, be it ocean energy, actually, for that matter. It is not clear necessarily to decision makers how big it is or what kind of an impact we have on it and what it does to us in a development and economic sense. So I'd like to bring in that angle of science also, and we are also very much engaged both in doing that type of analytics and in funding it.
Fantastic. That's a tremendous way to end this when we talked about the last 45 minutes on sustainable ocean economy and really bringing that economic dimension, into this. So this has been a terrific session. I wish to thank our speakers for your amazing words and times and thought on this. It's been such an sort of incredible insight into the sustainable ocean economy and how it should be developed and the importance of it and the importance that countries are indeed placing on it. Thanks to our event organizers, the technicians, the support staff from the European Environment Development Days team, and thank you to all for joining us on the line. So on behalf of all the panelists, I encourage our audience to move forward with a sustainable ocean economy in mind, thinking about new and innovative ways we can support our environment while building equitable and resilient economies. I think the overriding theme was healthy ocean, healthy people, healthy economy. I hope our audience enjoys the rest of your discussions today, and I'll leave you back to Brussels. Thank you.